much here? Oh boy. Well, let me know if the sound gets a little crazy. Whoa. Let me tell you, it's been a really interesting time to get ready for this talk. And I was supposed to do this in January, and then we had a terrible snowstorm. We canceled the meeting. And actually, that was a good thing, because it turns out I had no idea. I volunteered for this, but I had no idea what I was getting into. There were so many books. And this is a book that I took along with me when I went to see my doctor. And the nurse, the nurse was very interested in this, and so she said something about it. And then when he came in, he looked down and he said, "Oh, UFOs." He said, "That's interesting." And then I said, "I've got to give a talk on Monday, and I'm working as hard as I can." And I said, "Do you know, some of these people claim they were just picked up? They were picked up and put into a spacecraft?" And he said to me, "You be careful, don't get picked up." So far, that's worked out okay. Anyhow, what I've tried to do here is put together a number of things. And I don't know, before I do anything else, I talked to, last month, one person who had a sighting of a UFO. Let's see how this goes. How many people have had a sighting of a UFO? Really? Wow. Forget it, 1, 2. Before I do anything else, would you like to say something about what you saw?
Well, it was about 9 o'clock at night, and it looked like a Alfred Syracuse was just set there for approximately 4 to 5 minutes. Then it cut off and went south, and you just heard wheeze.
Really?
As it went.
Okay. Was it going pretty fast?
Yeah. 3 nights later, it was back to chasing. It was in the deck, and there it was again. This is 1969, maybe 1970.
And there was noise with this?
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
I can't tell you the date when it happened, but my neighbor and I were out on the back lawn, and we thought we saw this helicopter. It was just hovering. It just stayed right there in one spot, and then all of a sudden there were lights around, and then all of a sudden just like that, just disappeared.
Was there any sound with this?
No sound.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I just came in, and I didn't hearing a UFO, I think.
What?
I think I heard a UFO when I was young.
Okay.
In like middle school or something. It was like, it was winter at night, probably around 6 or 5. I was playing in the snow, and it sounded like some sort of tornado wailing, mechanical whale siren.
So you did hear sound then?
It was kind of loud a little bit,
Yeah.
faint, clear as day.
Okay. Anybody else? Do we have somebody
Back row.
back? Don't be shy. You're among friends.
So far.
Yeah.
I've never personally seen one, but I just recently set my trail camera up. You know where we live, just up the road from you.
Yeah.
It looks out over Morgan Hill. And there's
Okay.
just some weird things on my trail camera that I can't explain.
Oh my. This is interesting, and I think maybe what I'll start with here is when people talk about these UFOs, they normally mention a number of things that are common to what other people say. And somebody years ago looked at, I guess had a sighting, looked at the flight of these, come in, and said, "Hey, it looks, these things are flying like a saucer would if you threw it into the water and it kind of bobbed along like that." So somehow that stuck, and they called them flying saucers. I was going to put a couple of saucers together, didn't quite have time to do that. I'm going to put my hands together. But typically, This is a common report. Now, it doesn't agree with everything said here. This is a common report. The UFOs do come in different styles. Some of them look like eggs, if you could believe that. And they climb up a little ladder to get inside the egg. Others say it's like a long cigar. And they climb in, and maybe there's some windows lighting the sides of it. And some people have actually said, and I think I saw little people in there. Okay? But I think probably the most common one is the flying saucer idea. And here's something. This is the flying saucer, folks. This is a really cheap show here. But one of the things they say is hover. Now, we have some things that hover. We have helicopters, we have drones, and they can hover. So hovering may not seem like such a big thing, except, believe me, I had to read a lot of stuff to get ready for this one. Most of the reports will say no sound, no noise. They just hover with no sound. Now, if you look at a flying saucer, it of course doesn't have any wings, although some of them do have wings that kind of can be sprouted out. But they don't have wings usually. You'll see some of the pictures coming up. But how do they get the lift that they need? That's one thing. Here's something else. People will say they see a saucer flying along at a high rate of speed, and then it will turn 90 degrees and go straight up. 90 degrees. Somebody calculated the G's the pilot must be taking to make that 90-degree turn. Here's something else. Let's say we're hovering again, and all of a sudden people are watching it, and for whatever reason this thing starts to move, and it just goes straight up. Well, did you ever see an airplane go straight up? And then people will often say, and after about a couple, 2 or 3 minutes, it's gone. It's out of sight. Now, the people I like to hear are people like airplane pilots who have been in the sky. They know what's up there. They know what things look like. And they have a way of estimating the speed maybe better than the rest of us. And some people have said when that thing disappears out of your field of vision, it may be going like 15,000 miles per hour. 16,000, 17,000. An incredible speed. And then it can stop. It can even tilt like this and fly with this tilt. Incredible thing. Well, when did all this begin? Where did this come from? Who do you trust? Somebody who gives a lot of talks like this, he's written books about. There are people that spend their lives writing books about UFOs, believe it or not. And this guy said, when he gives a talk, he'll often say, how many people have had a sighting? And a lot of hands go up. And then he said, for those people that haven't reported the sighting, put your hand down. And a lot of hands go down. Now, the reason is, think about this. I'd like to know what you think about this. If you do report a sighting, you might be criticized, ridiculed. They might think you're a kind of a nutcase. And worse than that, suppose an airline pilot reports a sighting of some of these UFOs, and they have. The airline might look at this and say, this guy is weird. We got a lot of responsibility here. I think we're going to fire you. And they worry about that. Well, let's see what we got here. Let's see where all this goes. As you look up at the nighttime sky, and I know some of you do that, and some of you maybe haven't done that since you were courting your wife or your husband or whatever. But as you look up at the sky, the little dots of light there, And of course, those dots of light are really suns. Solar systems, maybe, if the sun happens to have a lot of planets with it. Now, ever think about this? What is there about the Earth which make it possible to develop this wonderful amount of life? Look at yourselves. Look how bright you are, how good you look. The Earth lets you develop to become this. And we invent things, and we learn things. What is there? Well, there's a lot of dots there. And for one of the reasons people have spent time, I've had a little problem today. I couldn't get my laser pointer to work, so I have a substitute. At any rate, we're looking at the solar system, our solar system, and this is the sun. Now, the scale is not right. These things should be stretched out, but they wanted to get it all into a book, so they didn't stretch them out. And this is a little planet called Mercury, and we expect and pretty well know there's no life there. It is just too warm. If you think about life as we know it, one of the things you need, water. And if you don't have liquid water, it could be a problem. That's one thing. For life like us, animals, people, we need oxygen in the air. If you're a tree, you don't. You give oxygen. So that's one thing. Well, Mercury, don't expect any life there. Venus. Venus is pretty well covered up with clouds and all, so we have never gotten a good look at this, but we suspect, from what we do know, it's too hot, it's too close to the sun, and probably is not a good place to live. And then, number 3, that's us. Now, have you heard that called the third rock from the sun? There's a reason. Let's go out a little further. Mars. There are people that once thought there's probably life on Mars. A great astronomer, Percival Lowell, for years studied this thing with a microscope, and he thought he saw canals all over the place, neatly, straight canals, and he said, there's got to be life there. Somebody came to Syracuse University many years ago, a psychologist of all things, and he said, we need to develop a place to live on Mars. The planet's getting too crowded. We never did that. We never did that. But let me tell you this. One of my favorite places to go in Chicago is a strip of land that has on it a Museum of Science and Industry. If you haven't been there, it's a fantastic museum. An aquarium, world-class aquarium, and the third thing is a planetarium. And as a kid, I went through those things over and over. I loved it. I still love it. And the last time we were there, I stood about from here to there, away from a machine that had been to Mars. And I felt, wow, this is amazing. This machine has been to Mars. People have not. Well, there's a third rock from the sun. And the first line there says it's the only place we know of where there's life. Well, I got to tell you this. There are so many heavenly bodies out there, so many planets out there, that the fact that this is the only one that we know has life is good to know, but don't you wonder, what about the others? And what I'm going to tell you tonight, a number of people will interpret as saying, yeah, we wanted to go to some of those planets. If you've been reading about this, there's a lot of talk about exoplanets, which are planets outside of our solar system. And they found so far over 3,000 of these things. And don't you wonder what life is there on there? And is it possible life is there, and what does the life look like? How does it function? Is it like us? And wouldn't it be nice if that life came to visit us? We're going to think about that tonight. Here we go. Third rock from the sun. Oh, here's Mars. This is some equipment here, which was there. It came by way of the rocket ships. If you see, it looks like it could be someplace in Arizona, maybe. It's kind of orangish. And when they sent these diggers and these sensors up to Mars, they had sensors that they hoped would tell them, are there the elements here that life needs? Is there any guess that there's life here? We don't know. We don't know. But look at the rest of these. There's a few more Mars things. Let me go back here. So you're wondering, well, what about these big giants here? And as a matter of fact, they are called, by some people, chemical giants. They are huge planets, but they're gas. And the gas is mostly hydrogen. And so you and I can't walk around on a big ball of hydrogen. And even if we could, the thinking is these are far enough from the sun, it wouldn't be warm enough. And the further out you go from the sun, the colder it gets. And all of that. So one place in our solar system making a place for us. But there's at least over 3,000 exoplanets. And, well, let me tell you this. So you can see this, again, this spacing is not correct, but here we are, and we're this far, kind of a golden mean from the sun. And so astronomers have a way of labeling things. And they say if you have a planet that's in the right place to its sun, and it gets the right amount of heat, and it's not too cold, and it's not too hot, maybe you can get some life there. Let's call that the Goldilocks zone. Yeah, that's it. I don't recall the story too well. Were the bears eating porridge? Was that what they were? And you must know. And one of them said, this is too hot. Another one said, this is too cold. Another one said, this is just right. Well, and of course, I think you recognize Saturn with its beautiful, beautiful ring system. Well, third rock from the sun, because we're talking about rock planets, and I think I'm judging it correctly by saying you need a solid, firm base to develop life. And there's more of Mars. Well, remember this gentleman here? There he is. When I was in starting college, I took a speech course, and we went down into the auditorium to give a speech there for the teacher. And this guy here, Albert Einstein, had just died. And one of the students reported on him. I remember that so well. And Einstein told us so much about physics and about the Earth. And one thing he said is that nobody can move faster than the speed of light. Well, how fast is the speed of light? I was going to make this clever for you and leave off the seconds, but there it is. 186,000 miles per second. And so if you want to figure out what it's going to be for a year, give yourself plenty of paper and just multiply it. There you go. Now, why do I tell you this? And the point here is this. Astronomers know that what they're dealing with, this incredible universe of ours, is so big. And mileage just isn't enough. But you have to, the best thing to do is put it in light years, meaning how much can anything move in the course of a year. And 1 light year, they thought, was the upper limit. Apparently, physicists now have taken that beyond and said, well, there's wormholes out there and things like that, so maybe you can go faster. Here's what I'm leading up to. Look at this graphic. Here's the Earth. Here we are. And the moon can send light back in 1.3 seconds. The sun can send us light, and it takes 9 light minutes to get here. But Alpha Centauri system is about 4.5 light years away. If you can imagine that you had something that would travel at the speed of light, and you were coming from Alpha Centauri here, do you think you could hunch down in this spacecraft and enjoy your life for 4.5 years? And yet we don't know if that's where these, if indeed somebody came from these different planets. And there's a lot of people that think that, and they don't call them humans, they call them humanoids, something like humans. But this is the closest one. Suppose it took 100 years to get here. Could? What's going to happen? Oh, one more thing. This is a different galaxy. Now, our galaxy, of course, is named the Milky Way. And I think some of you probably know why that is. But if you look at it a certain way, even in the night sky, you might be able to see a kind of a whitish band that runs across there. And it looks like milk. And so let's call this the Milky Way. The Milky Way is probably, some people say, has as many as 300 billion stars. With 300 billion, maybe more stars in this one thing. And if you wanted to cross this thing at the speed of light, it's 100,000 light years crossed to get across the Milky Way galaxy. That's one galaxy. They think that there's maybe 1 billion more or more galaxies. So if you think of all these possible places where life maybe could happen, well, would it happen in such a way that whoever these beings are, they can get here? And this is the issue. This is the issue. Well, our solar system, where else might we might find life? In our solar system, some other solar system, some other galaxy, and in the Goldilocks zone. Well, and so Earth is the only place in the solar system known to have life. We said that. And these are some of the things that people think are necessary. Liquid water. Well, yeah. If it's so cold, whatever you drink freezes up into an ice cube, you're probably not going to make it. Our atmosphere is about 20% oxygen. We need that. Maybe there's some other way to build life. We don't know. If we could just get some of these beings here and examine them and learn about them and measure things, wouldn't it be wonderful? And so we have the Goldilocks zone, and you're saying you must be close to a star. Maybe that's obvious. But if you're not close to a star, interstellar space is cold. It is really absolute, probably near absolute zero. So, there's, billions of places where maybe there's life. Maybe there's more things like us. Yeah, maybe, but we don't know. And if we could just get some of those beings to come here, sit down over coffee or whatever and talk, look what we can learn. Well, I think we covered all of this stuff. Milky Way has 300 billion stars. We covered that, and it's 100,000 miles across. This exoplanet thing is something that's, I think in the last 10 years, has really taken off. Now, you may wonder, you saw the field of stars. You can see it outside the door here, and you have. How do you see a planet? And what the astronomers do is, that they know if you've got a star here, and then you've got a little planet going by it, as the planet gets close to the star, there's a little wobble. And they pick that up. And if they measure, I don't know how these people have so much patience. It is incredible. They know there's at least 300 or 3,000 exoplanets now that they know about. Well, I've been trying to get you excited here about visitation. Does this guy look happy? Now, he's not from a star, he's not from an exoplanet. This is a guy named Kenneth Clark. The date is 1947, and that seems to be an important date. And a lot of things began to happen right around 1947, but many of you know this firsthand. World War II ended in 1945. And 2 years later, the country was still probably thinking about what it's like to have a war, to protect things, to work on certain things in the factories and so forth. And this guy, his field was kind of a salesman for something to do with environment, but he went from place to place in an airplane. And one day, he said, he's flying along, and all of a sudden, something gets very close to him, and it's not making any noise, but it's got lights on it, and it's moving quickly, and it gets right up to him like it's following him. Well, he had no idea what it was. But this guy was a pilot. He had thousands of hours of pilot. And he had a way of knowing what should be up there in the sky and what should not be. He also had a way of estimating speed. This was happening in the Northwest. I think it was Washington State. And he knew about one mountain peak here and one over there, and he knew what the distance was, and he had the good sense, he had a good timing device to time what it took this thing to go from first mountain to the second mountain, and he reported that his calculation was telling him this thing is moving at the speed of 12,000 miles per hour. 12,000. Other people have estimated even higher. And he looked at it for about 3 minutes, and then he said it seemed to then stop and begin to rise, and within seconds it disappeared from his field of view. Boy, how many of you have ridden in airplanes that'll do that? Oh, how many? And so it looked like, yes, something from a different planet. This appeared in the newspaper immediately, as you can suspect. Appeared in the newspaper immediately. And days after this, something else happened. Well, here he is. This is Kenneth Clark, and he said he had the artist draw the kind of spacecraft that he said he saw. And there it is. That's what he said he saw. And you kind of wish, as you read this stuff, don't we have better pictures? More pictures. We've got artists doing good jobs, but wouldn't we like to see what it really looks like in detail? And the answer is yes, but back in 1947, who walked around with a camera in their pocket? Most of you probably have one there right now, right? Here's Kenneth Clark talking to somebody about that spacecraft that he saw. Now, here's a story. See how you like this. You heard the name Roswell? Roswell, New Mexico? Okay, you're gonna hear about it now. There was it is a ranching area, and there was a man who was kind of the foreman for the ranching crew. His name was Mark Brazell, and he was doing his job, going from field to field and seeing how things are. And he went to one field, and he couldn't believe what he saw. He saw like wreckage all over the place. There was materials, looked something like, well, I don't know how to say this. It looked something like a dress maybe that you have, but it's made out of something apparently metal. And that was spread around. And then he checked some things. It looked like there was some kind of a small spacecraft about 30 feet wide. And so he checked that, and he claimed there were dead bodies inside. Now, they were dead. And wouldn't you think that this is the opportunity we've been talking about? Some people from other planets have come here to us, and they died, and that's a terrible thing, but we can't bring them back. But, oh, shouldn't we examine them and publish papers on them and do the microscope work? And I'd love to know what their brains look like. I taught brains in the university for 40 years or more. What do their brains look like? So, this got published in the newspaper. The Army Air Force captures flying saucer on branch in the Roswell region. New details of the flying disc are not revealed. Boy, wouldn't you like to see a headline like that and say, oh man, more information? And that's exactly what happened. The phones began to ring to the newspaper. And the people that published the article said, yeah, we've got permission from somebody higher up in the military. There's an air base right there. So they had to call there and tell them what we got. Is it okay to publish? And somebody said yes, and they published. Okay? And then, as the phones began to ring, boy, the military got very much alarmed and said, no, you published it. What can we do? What can we do? And so somebody got this brilliant idea. Why don't we say we're wrong? And it was not any kind of saucer that crashed here. What it really was, oh, let's skip these guys. What it really was, and this is a guy named General Ramey, it was a weather balloon. Can you imagine a weather balloon that goes at like 17,000 miles per hour? It makes a sharp right turn that goes up and disappears. And if that weather balloon gets a little bit knocked up, it looks like this. Well, it looks like that, all right, but it doesn't do all the things that the spacecraft would do. And if you look at this guy's face, you can maybe think, well, what do you think he's thinking? He's got to know, he must know, that what he's telling people in this picture is not true. It's a falsehood. And it's not only a falsehood, but it's silly. 17,000 miles per hour. Huh? Hover? Well, you can hover maybe. We'll give it that. But this is it. And what happened next is that the military, they had to report this to the air base. And the military people came, they brought a crew of 200 men, and these guys picked up every little bit of anything that they could pick up. Something that big would get picked up. And the government did just not want people to know what was going on. And some of these books spell it out, the titles maybe spell it out, and they say it's a huge, huge cover-up. Okay, first of all, do you have any response to the cover-up? How do you feel about that part? Don't be afraid to express yourself. You will not get arrested here.
What do you say about the dead people?
Ah, okay, let's start with the dead people, or humanoids. What has happened, and I've read this in different books, is that they, of course, wanted to get the debris and the dead bodies out of sight. Now, where did they take them? I was curious about that, and I think I know, I think it's spelled out in different books. They took them to maybe a Texas address originally, and then loaded them into maybe a B-29, which is the biggest bomber we had in World War II, and fly that to Ohio. Have you been to Dayton, Ohio? One of my favorite places on the earth. There is a wonderful, wonderful museum there. And if you love aircraft at all, go to that Dayton Museum. It is just amazing. And right down the road is a place called the Wright-Patterson Air Base. Anybody been there or been to the museum? Oh, you got something to do. That could be really very
How many
good.
light years is that away?
Was that
How many light years is that away?
the way you drive? Not many.
I thought we were in Washington State when he seen all the pilots, seen all the guys flying, and now we're down in Roswell, New Mexico on a different site.
Yeah.
What's the catch here?
Well, I think the Wright-Patterson. Now, remember, Wright. Another thing you can see there is the Wright brothers are from Dayton, Ohio. And so you may want to, I think you can see their home, but even more interesting is to go to Kitty Hawk on the coast, Atlantic coast, and you can see the place where they flew. Now, as you look at this, describing what these spacecrafts could do, they can really do a lot more than any of our airplanes could do. And one of the joys of my life, I think Irene too, is that for so many years, our neighbor was Dwayne Steele. And if you were to look at Dwayne's tombstone, you will see that he died in 1901. What is it?
It's born in 19.
I'm sorry.
Born in 1901.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to stick with the born part, thank you. And the Wright brothers flew in 1903. So he was born before the Wright brothers flew. And my point is this. People say, well, pilots have said, when they see some of these spacecraft up around them, and if they change speed, the spacecraft will go faster, go slower, change direction, and stay with them. It's an incredible thing. Well, how can, many of the pilots will say, whatever these spacecraft are, it did not come from this Earth. We cannot do this. The Russians cannot do this. That's it. And so my point is that if we had 100 years more, maybe we could do that. And we don't know when these beings, whoever they are, began to fly and began to develop the technology.
Chuck, quick question. You mentioned 200 men were sent to pick up the bodies and every little piece from the spacecraft. Wouldn't you think that years later on, some of those 200 men would say, hey, this is what really happened. This is what I really saw. But there's never, ever been any mention of an eyewitness about those bodies. You know, it's been completely hushed up.
Boy, that is a major point. And one of the things, maybe you have some idea about this, one of the things is the government did clamp down immediately. Yeah, you're quite right. And I've heard various things about these bodies. one of the things is that maybe when they went to Wright-Patterson Air Base, they were dumped into maybe the basement of a building there, and then they dumped in gravel or something and dirt on top of these bodies so nobody would ever see them again. Yeah, and for some reason, our government back then decided that there's a danger in letting anybody know what's really happening here. Anybody have any feelings about that? Why? I've never seen a listing of why, but I can tell you my thinking about it. One of them is, and they have said this, right or wrong, is that, well, this is like maybe 1947, 2 years away from this horrendous war, and now we're telling people, if you look around, you're going to see some things, and we don't know who they are, we don't know what their intentions are. It scares people, so let's not do that. There's something else, reverse engineering. When they picked up some of these scraps and all of that, they thought some of these things maybe could be used, maybe in a wartime situation, or they began to see Russia as a potential enemy in the next big war, or something like that. Maybe we get something real good, or get a spacecraft, and all these things they do. How do they do that? Maybe we can reverse engineer it, and we can do that. And I think that's part of it. And so whatever it is, there was. I'm not making this up. Some of these books do have. It's talking about that really. There's been a clamp down. There's been a denial. There's been all kinds of terrible things. And so this guy is probably thinking, boy, I don't want to be here, but I got to do it. And there he is.
See, ranch foreman didn't see anything, he just saw this debris, right?
Yeah.
He didn't see anything before that.
No, he didn't, but if some of these books here, here, for example, it's funny you mentioned Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Martin, and they're looking at thousands of reports of sightings. And some of these people here, you know, there are thousands of sightings. Well, yeah, what are you going to do about that? Aren't you going to have a revolt pretty soon? As people say, you don't tell us anything. Well, here's Wright-Patterson Air Base. Here's the way part of it looks like. And the UFO bodies may have been brought here. I did some more reading, and I think we can take out the May that they were brought there. Yeah.
It's inconceivable that the government would have had access to something like this and that no study and analysis was done of the materials and bodies. There's got to be a report somewhere.
Okay, we can help you on that point. I think it's the next slide. Here's my thinking. Why would the government want secrecy? Reverse engineering. Don't tell a potential enemy of what you're doing. And the potential enemy they thought was maybe Russia, communists in general. We don't want to alarm people. The Air Force does not want more jobs. Well, we can all say that, but when you think, who's going to protect us from whatever's going through the air? Well, Air Force. And they, this is something crazy. And they want to deal with the risk in their own way. Anyway, yeah, you make a very good point. Oh, before we get there, you recognize this guy? Yeah, Coldwater. Coldwater had many friends. He had power, and he knew some of the people, military people and otherwise, who were in charge of things like air bases and collections of bodies and whatever. And so he said to one of the generals, I want you to tell me what's really going on with these dead bodies, and I want to see them. I want to come in. Let me come in and see them. And this general got so upset that he said, no, no, he says, never, ever ask me that again. I cannot help you. I cannot let you see the bodies. On a little brighter note, if you remember Marilyn Monroe, she wasn't one of the bodies, no. Marilyn Monroe was, she was, of course, kind of a sex object for a lot of people. And so this guy thought, I don't remember where this was, but he was in a city where she was. And he had some connections with the military, and he had somebody who would let him go to the place where there was debris and there were bodies. And so he called up Marilyn somehow, and he said, would you like to go see dead bodies from a different planet and debris from our spacecraft? And she went. So this guy got a date with Marilyn Monroe by somehow working this out. How do you explain these things? It gets crazier, but here is one of the answers to maybe not the good answer, but the what she said, and that is some of the presidents, including Harry Truman, one of my favorites, formed a group that he called playfully the Majestic 12. How do you like that? What they did is, if you had a sighting, and then you had forms you could fill out, send them in to the group, which apparently met on a regular basis, and they would try to explain what you had seen. Now, you've already seen that weather balloon that somebody thought would pass for a spacecraft. And so it's not surprising to you that they would go to any length, it seemed, to say, what you saw was a normal thing. There were birds flying under a light and reflections off of their breast. Wait a minute. Birds flying under a light, lights coming down, we get reflections off their breast. But that was the kind of thing, and they did that. Many different groups. One of them was called Blue Book. It wasn't really a book at all, it was a group of people. Another one was called Grudge. And I think they begrudged doing this, or didn't begrudge telling you anything. Another one called Sign. And so this went on for a long time until finally there was something passed called the Freedom of Information Act. And so you could now say, at last, I can go to these government agencies and tell them what I want to know when they've got to tell me. Yeah, sure. I've seen some of these reverse messages from the government, and you may see a typed sheet here, and about half of it is blacked out. So you'll never know what was under the black. That was about what you could find out. And they claimed that only about 10% of the messages, only about 10% were actually unexplainable and could be something like a different planet. Yeah. Well, one of the things that strikes me whenever I look at spacecrafts and UFOs and so forth is how little in the way of pictures that we have. Now, some of them, they're like the artist makes a nice book cover and puts in details, which maybe he can't see, but he puts them in anyhow. Are these, I think, there's a spacecraft, and if you expand it, enlarge it, you get that. So, well, pick up something. This one is rather widely trusted. Rather widely trusted it's made by the Trent family. And one day, for some time, they happened to see something in the sky near their farm and near their mailbox, as you can see. And so they enlarged that. We don't see very much, but we do see something. And that's the way it is. But pilots, I think, are seeing the most detail. And here's a pilot. Flying discs are called real by air veterans. And they would certainly include Kenneth Clark in that. Well, I think we already covered all of this, but this is what a flying saucer can do. And if you talk to some of these pilots, yeah, They did say, yes, I saw it doing all these things. And then they often say, and then that's how I knew this craft is not of the earth. It was not made here. It was not invented here. This is just too out of it. So far ahead of us. Our stuff cannot do this. And so very often they would schedule some of the fighter planes in the 40s and 50s to go up and see if they can shoot down any of these spacecrafts. I think they never could. You got a plane that maybe flies top speed 300 miles an hour. You got one that's going 17,000 miles an hour. Who's going to win that contest? It's not good at all. Well, here's one at 1,200 or 12. It's only, yeah, that's not very fast. That's only 1,200. Let's skip this guy. But look at this one. See, you may have a number of questions right now, such as, well, how many people saw this? How many people really reported things? For one thing, they're worried about being ridiculed. Oh, let me tell you this, the military gets involved in so many of these things there. And as they do, like picking up pieces of whatever that stuff is on the floor, on the ground, picking this up, and then they're told by their superior, look, and these are almost the exact words, they appeared a lot, they were used a lot. You didn't see what you saw. And if you tell anyone that you did, your future is going to be in grave doubt. Well, suppose you're in the military. That means you're never going to get promoted. You might get somehow dismissed. That's one thing. If you tell other people who think maybe you're kind of a nutcase, well, that's not going to help you. They're going to think maybe you've been drinking way too much. That's not going to help you. There's a whole lot of reasons not to report. But look at how many reports there are. This is I think it wants to kill me. This is 2000. This is 2001. And this is 2015. And you see it's kind of low, if you consider that to be low, and then all of a sudden it starts going up like this, and we've got a bump. Now the people that study UFOs, when you got something going up like that, they call that a flap. Or for whatever reason, you got a flap here. Now, of course, that could be there's a lot more UFOs coming and out there, or it could be we got a lot more people reporting, or whatever. But look at the numbers. Look at this number. In the 21st century, 2001, 2015, 5,141 sightings, and you've got to consider that there's a whole lot of people who saw something and are afraid to report it. Does this number surprise you?
Yeah.
Yeah? I know most of you, it doesn't surprise you. Why not?
I think it's surprising.
Yeah?
I mean, it's incredible.
Did you ever see one?
No, but my neighbor did, in Preble, across the
Uh-huh.
street,
In
the
Preble.
whole family. It's around 1968, around that.
Mhm.
So probably other people in Preble saw it,
Oh, my.
maybe even Tully.
Rebel and Tully. A lot of you didn't. I know Irene said she feels like she never hasn't had a full life because she never saw one.
I do feel cheated, I've lived a long time and I haven't seen it.
Chuck, is that broken down by region, state,
Um,
county?
Oh, I'm glad you said that.
Well,
It's New York State. This is all New York State.
it says that on the top, but is it broken down
Yeah,
by?
but you can see, and in terms of the states, New York State is sixth. We got a 51 there. New York State is sixth.
Is that Cheryl Klaus's work?
It might be. I got it from a book, and I don't think I have her book.
I looked, I was talking with her the other day, and I told her I was coming here, and she looked up Fabius, and in that 15-year.
Oh, wait a minute. I think it is her. Yes, yes.
In that, she's done an amazing piece of research.
Yeah.
She said in her data, there's one from Fabius,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
but you don't always know, like, if you could have 10 people see it down and checking for us up in Palm Beach. But it is. It does
yes.
specific.
I think it was hers, yes. Yeah, she has quite a publication there with
Yes.
lots and lots of numbers. Let me say this, the sightings in this country have come from all over the place, and some states do have more than others, for whatever reason. But they also come from all over the world, Antarctica, Russia, Indonesia. This is not something that is here. And one of the things which I have never even seen a guess about is, well, first of all, are we talking about real things here? You got to make that decision. Somebody said if you look at UFOs, it kind of breaks up the population into three groups. And one group are deniers, about a third maybe. One group are deniers. Now these people are nuts. They have time on their hands. Why don't they get a job? You know. A second group, believers. And one of the, I didn't mention Heineck here. I just showed a picture of him. But this is his book. And he is really a convert, I think I could say. He started out, and he's a scientist. Had a good reputation as a scientist, worked on, got interested in this UFO business, and he just kept going and spent his life at it. But originally, he's a denier. But he said the evidence for him built up, and up to the point where he said, yeah, these are real. And if you did a little research on the computer, you can find out, you can get books on this which say something of the type of the wording of these are real. And then you've got people that just don't know. And maybe they don't care. But you see, if you're a scientist and you've got people from other solar systems, I guess, dropping dead on your property, well, at least you could learn something about it. And here we go. Yeah, this may be. And here's a typical thing. One of the course, I said it'd be nice to have more pictures, right? But a lot of things you see at night, and what you're going to see mostly are lights. And so often these UFOs, the lights are very, very bright. And so to me, I'm looking at this and saying, boy, this is amazing. These people had maybe to come from many light years away. That must take a lot of energy. Here they are. And there are some landings reported, but a lot, not so many really. And they always seem to have lights, bright lights. And the people say, that's what called my attention to this thing. Suddenly it's lighting up around me. What is being used as the energy for all of this? I don't think we have a guess, really. Well, more lights, and they do all the things we said, hovering in 90-degree angles and so forth. And what is amazing, the word intelligently is often used. If you see these lights and they're going along like this, it could mean that the V-shaped arrangement is where the lights are on the UFO. It could also mean, in some cases, that every light is a different UFO, and they are somehow so incredibly well programmed. That they can maintain, it's like a dancing team operating at an incredible rate of perfection. And there it is. So this is, you know, we're looking at something, let's get that, a few things. Now, again, I don't know if that is a really nice camera shot, or is that a really nice artist who took somebody's advice and crude drawing and made something like that. But it's very common here to say there's a row of windows somewhere. And then people sometimes go beyond that, well, and I saw little people. Well, the little people like 4 feet tall or something. And let me get to the picture of that because we're running out of time here. Oh, this I like. Whatever it is you're doing, whatever kind of data you're collecting, usually you want to get more. You want to get other people doing it. You want to see it wasn't just one person did this and it was crazy, but it turned out interesting. You'd like to get a group. And it seems to me that these people here, and this is common, where you get a group of people and they're looking up at the same thing. And if they're going to write a report, they can all say pretty much the same thing. And this has happened. I think one day at the Chicago airport, at the Chicago airport, some of these spacecraft were seen, 6 or 7 of them for maybe an hour. And then things got dull in Chicago again. Oh, if any of you had sent a report, a sighting report to one of those strange committees, one of the answers they may have given you is that, yeah, you did see something. Well, what you saw was not a spacecraft. Come on, get serious. What you saw was Venus. Because on the Earth, they said, if you got the sun, of course, that's everybody knows what that is. But you got the moon, yeah, I know where that is. But in size, the next smallest thing that you can see is the planet Venus, and that's what we have here. The picture claimed that's Venus and that's the moon, and if it looks that big, it's not just a little dot. It looks that big. A lot of people say, hey, that's a sighting, and report it, and they're going to say, no spacecraft. You just looked at Venus. And so that's a very common thing. Well, I want to finish this up. Now, admittedly, when you look at that being on the left, it doesn't look like, we hope, anybody in your family. It's a stranger. But I think this kind of reports, this kind of tells people what a lot of observers claim they saw. Now again, well, what do you mean? You invite them over for dinner? Where do you see these people? There have been reports of people who have been abducted. And that means they're claiming, this may be a good place to go out here, that they were minding their business, maybe doing something in the backyard, maybe driving their car, and maybe a spacecraft comes by, and it's huge, and they see it, and it's keeping pace with the car. And so this really happened. There's a book here called Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. This is a couple. They're both married before. They now married each other. Good marriage, it sounds like. Barney is a sensible guy, doesn't like crazy things. She's very sensible. She's a hard worker. He's a hard worker. And then one day, they see this thing following them along in the car. And then they find out that, wait, what is this thing? So they stop the car. Barney gets out his binoculars and he looks at it and he sees incredible things on this thing. It's a flying saucer. And so he sees that. Well, he decides, you know, let's be sensible. We got to get out of here. So they jump in the car and they go down the road and the spacecraft follows them. Well, they decide, well, let's see if we can, one more stop, and then we can maybe make a plan and get out of here. And so they do. And what happens is they seem to have a kind of fuzzy feeling of what happened after that, and then they seem to wake up again, and they make a run for home, and they get there. But as they get home, they sit down, they worry, they think, what just happened? This was crazy. We're scared to death. Whatever it was, we never saw anything like it before. Well, eventually, here's where the story gets kind of weird. Eventually, some people say, hey, you know, oh, they do say this. Say, when we got home, we thought it would be about 3 o'clock in the morning.